Good evening. I want to start by saying something you might not expect from someone giving a motivational speech. Life will break you, not once, not twice, but many times, and it won't always be dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, a silent ache in the morning, a subtle sense that you're no longer who you thought you were. Maybe you've been there. You lose your job, your business fails, someone you trusted walks away. Or you wake up and realize that the person in the mirror feels like a stranger. We don't like talking about those moments, do we? We rush to the fix, the lesson, the quote on Instagram. But I want to sit in that space for a moment, not because I enjoy pain, but because that space, the one we try so hard to escape, is where everything starts. I remember talking to a Marine who served 3 tours overseas. He told me the hardest battle he ever fought wasn't in a war zone. It was coming home not knowing who he was without the uniform. He said, "I had to let something die before I could live again." That line stayed with me. You see, when life breaks you, something is dying, an old identity, an illusion of control, a belief you held about how things were supposed to go. But here's the truth we often forget. Sometimes the breakdown is not the end. It's the clearing before the foundation is rebuilt. I speak to leaders, entrepreneurs, students, parents, all different walks of life, but they all ask the same question in the dark: why me? But maybe the better question is, what now? What now that you've lost the title? What now that the plan fell apart? What now that you're standing in the rubble of what you thought was your future? That's the moment where growth begins. Not with answers, but with better questions. Not with certainty, but with courage, because life doesn't break you to destroy you. It breaks you to reveal you. Think about this. A seed has to crack before the tree can grow. A muscle has to tear before it becomes stronger. A heart has to open sometimes through pain before it can love more fully. We want resilience without the hardship. We want strength without the struggle, but it doesn't work that way. Resilience isn't how we avoid the fall. It's how we rise after it, and the people who rise the best are not the ones who never broke. They're the ones who learned from the breaking. So if you're in that space right now, if life has broken something in you, don't rush past it. Sit with it, learn from it, ask it what it's trying to show you, and then when you're ready, stand up. Not to go back to who you were, but to grow into who you were meant to be. Because the truth is, life will break you, but it can also build you if you let it. When life breaks you, it often feels like the end of certainty, the end of direction, the end of identity as you knew it. And yet, in so many of these moments, the ones where everything seems to fall apart, what we're really experiencing is not an ending, but a beginning. It just doesn't look like one yet. Most people believe transformation is something you choose. That you wake up one day, decide to change your life, and then do it with clarity and conviction. But that's not usually how it works. Real transformation rarely starts with a choice. It starts with a crack. A job loss, a betrayal, a diagnosis, a moment when the version of reality you had carefully built for yourself starts to disintegrate. What's most disorienting isn't the event itself, it's what it takes from you. It robs you of your narrative, the story you've been telling yourself about who you are, what your life means, and where it's going. You find yourself looking around and asking, what now? That's the beginning. The moment after the breaking. It's where all the noise dies down, where distractions lose their power, where everything that was once layered on top of you, the roles, the labels, the assumptions begins to fall away. It's painful, but it's also clarifying. In those quiet, broken moments, we are stripped down to something more essential, and what's essential is usually invisible when life is going well. When things are stable, we often confuse comfort with truth. We mistake success for purpose. We assume motion means progress, but when life breaks us, those illusions are exposed, and we are left with something more honest, more raw, more real. The discomfort of being broken is not something to romanticize, but it is something to respect. Because in that space, the space between what was and what will be, we're offered the chance to confront who we truly are. We no longer have the luxury of performance. We can't fake confidence. We can't posture. We can't pretend. And so we meet ourselves maybe for the first time. This is the part of transformation that most people miss. They think change happens after the pain is over, but often the change is already happening in the pain. The moment you begin to ask, "Who am I now that this is gone?" you're already evolving. You're not broken in the sense of being defective, you're broken open, and something deeper begins to emerge. Think of nature. Think of the forest floor after a fire. It looks like devastation, but beneath the surface, seeds are cracking open. The soil, once hard and dry, is now softened and rich. In time, growth emerges not in spite of the breaking, but because of it. The same is true in us. When life breaks us, the version of ourselves that was small, rigid, or overly defined starts to fall apart. And while that feels like loss, it's also an invitation to stop clinging to who we were and start discovering who we can be. To stop performing and start becoming. It's in that space raw, unsteady, unfamiliar that transformation becomes possible. But here's the tension. We're often so desperate to avoid pain that we try to glue the broken pieces back together too quickly. We try to resume the old story, to patch things up, to get back to normal. The world reinforces this get over it, move on, bounce back. But what if you're not supposed to bounce back? What if you're meant to break through? People who emerge stronger after life breaks them aren't stronger because they resisted the breaking. They're stronger because they accepted it. They didn't rush to restore what was lost. They sat in the loss and listened. They allowed the silence to teach them. They didn't just rebuild, they built differently. This isn't about glorifying suffering. It's about acknowledging that real growth rarely comes from comfort. We evolve most when we're disoriented, when we can no longer rely on our default patterns and are forced to search for something deeper. That searching, though uncomfortable, is the foundation of transformation. So often, we measure progress by how quickly we return to the way things were. But what if the greatest progress is found in refusing to go back? What if breaking is the only way to break free from limitations, free from ego, free from the narratives we've outgrown? People say everything happens for a reason. And while that phrase can feel empty in the midst of pain, there's a deeper truth beneath it. Meaning isn't found in the event itself. Meaning is something we make after the breaking. We don't find meaning in the moment of impact. We find it in what we build after, in the courage to explore what's on the other side of certainty, in the humility to admit we don't know who we are anymore, and the bravery to find out. Transformation through breaking is rarely linear. It doesn't look like progress. It looks like confusion. It looks like one step forward, 2 steps back. It looks like letting go of control. But slowly, quietly, in that uncertainty, a new self begins to form, not in the image of who we used to be, but in the image of who we're becoming. That process doesn't announce itself. It doesn't always feel like growth. But if you look closely, you'll notice the shift. You'll find yourself responding differently, noticing more, reaching deeper, listening better, and one day you'll realize that the version of you that existed before the breaking could never have handled what you now carry with grace. We think the breaking is the worst thing that can happen. But sometimes the worst thing that can happen is living a life that was never truly ours. Breaking can be the very thing that sets us free from that. It tears away the noise and brings us back to what really matters, not what we've built on the outside, but what we're cultivating on the inside. And so, when life breaks you, as it inevitably will, you are not ruined. You are not finished. You are simply being invited into a different kind of beginning, one not built on the illusion of control, but on the foundation of truth. One that doesn't just change what you do, but transforms who you are. When life knocks us off balance, our first instinct is often to look for answers. We want resolution. We want clarity. We want a sense of control to return. That need for answers is deeply human. It soothes our anxiety, gives us structure, and allows us to feel like we're moving forward. But in the space between what we once knew and what we haven't figured out yet, the pursuit of quick answers can become a trap. Growth, real growth, doesn't begin with answers. It begins with better questions. When something breaks in our lives, a relationship, a job, a dream, our confidence, we tend to ask the same reflexive question. Why is this happening to me? It's understandable. It's emotional. It gives voice to our pain, but it's also limiting. That question keeps us focused on the past. It anchors us in a victim mindset. It's a question that searches for blame, not for movement. And when we're in the midst of change or loss, we don't need blame, we need direction. Better questions open us. They expand our perspective. They shift our focus from what's missing to what's possible, from what we've lost to what we can build, from who we were to who we're becoming. The right question doesn't resolve everything instantly, but it invites us to explore more deeply, and that exploration is what leads to transformation. Most people ask questions that reinforce the identity they're trying to preserve. How do I get back to where I was? How do I fix this? How do I make it look like nothing happened? These questions are rooted in fear. They're trying to restore an old version of ourselves, a version that may have already outlived its purpose. Growth asks a different set of questions. It asks, what can I learn from this? What is this trying to show me about myself? What needs to change not just out there, but in here? This shift from answers to questions is not about abandoning logic or goals. It's about creating space. When we're in pain, we tend to narrow our thinking. We want certainty because uncertainty feels unsafe. But life doesn't always give us certainty. It gives us seasons, signals, transitions, and if we're too busy trying to force solutions, we might miss the message. I've met countless people at turning points in their lives, leaders, artists, students, parents. The most profound shifts never came from having the right answer. They came when they stopped pretending they had it all figured out. They allowed themselves to ask deeper, messier, more honest questions. Questions like, what part of me have I been avoiding? Or what truth have I been unwilling to face? Or what kind of life am I really building, and is it aligned with who I want to become? There's something powerful about a person who is willing to sit in the unknown and ask, not with desperation, but with curiosity. That kind of questioning is not weak, it's brave. It requires humility to admit you don't know. It requires courage to challenge your assumptions, and it requires patience to sit with questions that may not have immediate answers. Children are masters of this. They ask questions endlessly, not because they're looking for the answer that ends the conversation, but because they're exploring. They're learning, they're alive to wonder. Somewhere along the way, as we grow older, we lose that posture. We trade curiosity for certainty. We begin to value having answers more than asking better questions. But what if the questions matter more? What if, in seasons of struggle or change, the best thing we can do is return to that childlike wonder, not naive, but open? Better questions don't just change how we think, they change how we feel. A bad question can trigger shame, guilt, and fear. What's wrong with me? Why do I always fail? Why can't I be like them? These are not real questions, they're disguised judgments, and they keep us stuck. A better question, even in the same situation, sounds like, what patterns do I keep repeating, and what can I learn from them? Or what would healing look like for me right now? These questions invite growth instead of reinforcing shame. In the corporate world, teams that ask better questions innovate faster. In relationships, couples who ask better questions grow deeper trust. In personal development, individuals who ask better questions make more meaningful progress. Across every domain of life, the quality of your questions shapes the trajectory of your growth. But here's the thing, asking better questions isn't easy. It requires slowing down, and we live in a culture obsessed with speed of results, speed of recovery, speed of success. Slowing down feels inefficient. It feels counterproductive, but growth doesn't move at the speed of efficiency. It moves at the speed of awareness, and awareness starts with asking, what's really going on here? Sometimes the most powerful question you can ask is one that has no answer, at least not right away. What does this moment want from me? What am I pretending not to know? What would it mean to let go of what no longer serves me? These questions aren't meant to be solved like equations. They're meant to be lived. You don't always need more information. You need more reflection. Answers often rush to the surface, especially the ones shaped by fear or habit. But the deeper truths, the ones that guide us forward, often rise slowly. They come when we sit with the question long enough, when we hold space for silence, when we stop trying to fix and start trying to understand. That's why some of the wisest people you'll ever meet don't speak in absolutes. They speak with intentionality. They don't pretend to know everything. They listen more than they speak. And when they do speak, it's often with a question. Not to challenge others, but to invite them to think more deeply. That kind of presence, that kind of inquiry, is what shapes not just moments, but lives. So much of our internal struggle comes from trying to force clarity when what we really need is perspective. And perspective doesn't come from having the right answer. It comes from asking the right question at the right time, not to end the conversation, but to begin the transformation, not to close a loop, but to open a door, not to make sense of everything right now, but to create space for something new to emerge. Resilience is a word that gets used a lot. We hear it in motivational speeches, in therapy sessions, in corporate boardrooms. It's become a kind of buzzword, a trait we're all supposed to have, an ideal we're meant to embody. But we often misunderstand what resilience really is. We think it's about strength, toughness, the ability to keep going no matter what. And while there is truth in that, it misses something crucial. Resilience isn't built in the moments when everything is going smoothly. It's built in the moments when everything falls apart and we choose to rise. Most people associate resilience with never falling, with avoiding failure, with staying strong under pressure. But that's not resilience. That's resistance. True resilience isn't about how well you hold your ground when life is easy. It's about how you respond when life breaks your rhythm. When the loss comes, when the plan fails, when the door slams shut, that's when resilience is formed not in the comfort of the climb, but in the uncertainty of the fall. Falling is not the failure. It's human, it's expected. What defines us is what we do after we fall. Do we numb ourselves and try to pretend it didn't happen? Do we scramble to put the pieces back together exactly the way they were? Or do we pause, breathe, and choose to rise differently, slowly, consciously? The rise is what matters. It's not glamorous, it's not immediate, and it's rarely accompanied by applause. Rising means taking a shaky first step when you still don't know where you're going. It means choosing hope when doubt is louder. It means trusting yourself again, even when your confidence has been shattered. That's resilience, not perfection, but persistence. Not invincibility, but adaptability. Think about the people you admire, the ones who seem wise, grounded, deeply human. Chances are they've been through something, they've fallen, they've lost, they've faced hardship, and they've chosen to rise. And in that rising, something changed in them. They didn't just go back to the person they were before. They became someone new, someone more whole, more aware, more rooted in something real. Resilience is often quiet. It doesn't show up in big gestures or dramatic moments. It shows up in the decision to try again after failing, in the choice to speak with kindness after being hurt, in the effort to keep moving forward when everything inside you wants to give up. It's built one decision at a time, small, ordinary choices that add up to something extraordinary. There's a myth that resilient people are somehow different from the rest of us, that they have some internal armor that protects them from pain. But resilience isn't something you're born with. It's something you build, and the only way to build it is to go through the fire, to experience disappointment, heartbreak, fear, and keep showing up anyway. One of the most dangerous lies we tell ourselves is that we should have it all together, that if we're strong, we shouldn't struggle. But struggle is not a sign of weakness. It's the soil where strength is born. The people who look the strongest on the outside are often the ones who have learned how to carry their scars with grace. They've fallen, not once but many times, and they've learned how to get back up with intention, with wisdom, with deeper compassion for themselves and others. In a culture that glorifies hustle and celebrates wins, we don't talk enough about what it takes to recover. We don't celebrate the quiet comebacks, the personal recoveries, the moments when someone chooses healing over hiding, growth over shame, presence over escape. But those are the moments that define us, that shape our character, that teach us what we're made of. Resilience is not about snapping back into place. It's not about returning to who you were before the hardship. It's about becoming someone new in the aftermath of struggle. It's about integrating the experience, not erasing it, and letting it inform your values, your direction, your identity. The people who rise with resilience don't ignore what happened to them. They absorb it, they learn from it, they use it. There's a Japanese art form called kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold. The idea is that the breakage is not something to hide, but something to highlight. The object is more beautiful because of the break, not in spite of it. That's resilience, not hiding the cracks, but honoring them. Not pretending we're unbreakable, but showing that we're stronger because we broke. The rise is rarely linear. There will be days when you feel like you're moving forward, and days when you feel like you've fallen back. That's part of the process. Resilience doesn't mean you never feel lost. It means you keep coming home to yourself over and over again. You keep choosing to try to learn to trust, even when it's hard. What makes rising so difficult is not just the pain, it's the fear that it might happen again. That we might fall again, that we might trust and be hurt, that we might hope and be disappointed. But resilience is not the absence of fear. It's the ability to move forward with fear in the room, to say, I'm scared and I'm still choosing to rise. There is a quiet dignity in that choice. It doesn't always feel powerful in the moment, but over time, it builds a foundation of inner strength that no one can take from you. You stop needing to prove yourself. You stop fearing failure in the same way. Because you've been there, you've faced it, and you know that even if it happens again, you have what it takes to rise. We all want the story of our lives to be about success, about triumph, about progress. But the most meaningful chapters are often the ones where we fall and rise again, where we discover what matters most, where we let go of what no longer serves us, where we find the strength not just to survive, but to grow. Resilience doesn't erase the pain, it doesn't prevent the fall. It simply changes what we do next. It gives us the courage to rise with more clarity, more depth, more resolve. It teaches us that we don't need to be perfect to be powerful, that we don't need to be untouched to be whole, that we don't need to have all the answers to keep going. There is a moment after life has broken you where everything becomes quiet. Not peaceful, not yet, but quiet. The noise of the world, the distractions you used to rely on, the busyness you used to hide in, all fall away. What's left is you, just you. And in that space, where the old version of you no longer fits, but the new version hasn't yet emerged, you meet something you may have spent your whole life avoiding: stillness. Stillness is not inactivity. It's not apathy, it's not stagnation. Stillness is presence. It's the moment you stop trying to outrun the pain and finally turn around to face it. It's the courage to be where you are, fully, without rushing to change it, fix it, or escape it. And in a world that rewards speed, productivity, and performance, stillness is one of the most radical things you can choose, because stillness forces you to feel. It removes the buffers. It invites you to notice the ache you've been ignoring, the questions you've been avoiding, the truths you've been too busy to hear, and that's uncomfortable. Most of us aren't taught how to sit with discomfort. We're taught how to manage it, suppress it, medicate it, distract from it. But real transformation doesn't come through avoidance. It comes through attention. It comes from sitting in the silence long enough to hear what your life has been trying to tell you. When everything else has been stripped away, the titles, the plans, the certainty, what you find in the stillness is yourself. Not the self you project to the world, not the self you've been trying to live up to. The self beneath all of that. The self that is not defined by achievement or opinion or outcome. The self that simply is. And for many people, meeting that version of themselves is both unsettling and liberating. Because we are conditioned to define ourselves by doing, by succeeding, by proving. Stillness removes the metrics. It asks nothing of you except that you be honest. It doesn't care about your resume, your reputation, or your record. It only cares about what's real, and that's what makes it so powerful. It reveals who you are when no one is watching, who you are when the masks come off, who you are when the expectations fall away. Most people avoid stillness not because they dislike quiet, but because they fear what might rise in the quiet. Regrets, fears, unanswered questions, all the feelings they've pushed aside in the name of progress. But here's the truth. What you avoid will always control you. The only way to be free of it is to face it, to sit with it, to understand it, and that process, as uncomfortable as it may be, is where growth begins. Stillness is not the opposite of movement. It's the foundation of intentional movement. When you act from rest, from clarity, from presence, your actions carry a different weight. They're no longer reactive. They're responsive. They're rooted. You're not scrambling to prove your worth. You're moving from a place of already knowing it. And that kind of action, the kind born out of reflection rather than reaction, changes lives. It's in stillness that we learn how to listen, not just to others, but to ourselves, to the signals our bodies give us, to the quiet knowing in our hearts, to the whispers of intuition we often ignore. So much of wisdom is not about gaining new information, it's about remembering what we already know, deep down, but have forgotten in the noise. Stillness teaches you that healing doesn't happen on a schedule, that growth isn't always linear, that the most important breakthroughs often happen not when you're doing more, but when you're doing less, when you allow space for integration, for reflection, for simply being. This is countercultural. We're praised for pushing through, for staying busy, for never stopping. But what if the stopping is where the real change happens? What if slowing down is not a detour, but the path itself? What if the most important work you can do isn't about striving, it's about seeing? Seeing yourself clearly, seeing what matters, seeing what's been weighing you down. In stillness, clarity rises. The kind of clarity that can't be forced, only found. It doesn't shout, it whispers, and if you're moving too fast, you'll miss it. When you allow yourself to be still, you begin to notice things you've overlooked, patterns in your life that no longer serve you. Stories you've been telling yourself that need rewriting. People you've been holding on to who aren't really holding on to you. Goals that once felt urgent but now feel empty. And in that noticing, change begins quietly but deeply. Stillness gives you back your power. Not the kind of power that dominates, but the kind that grounds. The kind that comes from knowing who you are, what you value, and what you're no longer willing to compromise. It's a quiet strength, but it's unshakable, because it's not dependent on circumstance. It's not about being in control of everything, it's about being connected to yourself, no matter what happens. You can't rush stillness. You can't schedule a breakthrough. You can't force insight, but you can create space for it. You can choose to step back from the noise. You can choose to turn inward. You can choose to listen. And that choice made over and over again creates a life that is not just full, but meaningful. In stillness, you learn that presence is more powerful than performance, that depth is more valuable than speed, that who you are is more important than what you do, and this changes how you show up in the world. You stop trying to impress, and you start trying to connect. You stop chasing perfection, and you start practicing truth. You stop striving for more, and you start living with enough. This is not about becoming passive. It's about becoming intentional. Stillness doesn't make you less effective, it makes you more aligned. You stop pouring energy into things that drain you. You start focusing on what really matters. You make decisions not from fear, but from clarity. And in doing so, you begin to live a life that is not just reactive, but reflective. The most transformative moments in life often happen in the pauses, in the in-between spaces, in the silence after the storm. Stillness gives you access to those moments. It doesn't give you all the answers, but it helps you ask the right questions. It doesn't erase the pain, but it helps you hold it with more compassion. It doesn't speed up the process, but it honors the process. The world will try to pull you back into motion. It will reward you for being busy. It will pressure you to keep up. But every time you choose stillness, you're making a different kind of statement, one that says your worth isn't measured by output, that your healing isn't a race, that your truth is worth waiting for. And in that space, you begin to reclaim your life, not the life you built for others, but the life that is actually yours, the one that comes into focus when everything else goes quiet,